Have you ever really stopped to think about what it's like to be a doctor right now? I mean, beyond the TV shows, the white coat, all of that, there is a serious crisis brewing. We're seeing incredibly talented, dedicated people walking away from a profession they spent their entire lives trying to get into. And it's not just because they're tired. It's something way, way deeper. Today, we're going to get into what doctors are finally saying out loud about why they're quitting medicine for good.
Just let that sink in for a second. Imagine you dedicate more than a decade of your life, you completely sacrifice your youth, you take on this mountain of debt, only to get to this point. And this isn't some hypothetical. This is a real quote from a real doctor who is done. And the personal cost here is just devastating. A family physician said this on her very last day of seeing patients. And she knew the system had failed her, but that feeling of personal failure, it was just all-consuming. That's the emotional weight that they're carrying. Look, this isn't just a few sad stories here and there. No, this is a huge, widespread problem. A recent study found that nearly half of all doctors, if they could do it all over again, would pick a different career. So what on earth is driving this massive wave of regret? Well, let's break it down. To really understand why they're leaving, we have to start at the beginning. We have to understand the staggering price they have to pay just to get in the door. It all starts with this beautiful dream. But the reality of that journey, well, it's often a complete nightmare. So on one hand, you've got the dream, right? This noble calling. It's the whole reason people put themselves through the grinder, to help people, to cure, to make a real, tangible difference. But then you look at the other side of the ledger, and the reality is a brutal, brutal trade-off. We're talking about sacrificing the most formative years of your life, your 20s and your 30s, while all your friends are out there building careers, starting families, living life.
And this timeline, this really puts that commitment into perspective. This is no exaggeration. You do 4 years of undergrad, then 4 more years of med school. And then you do residency for anywhere from 3 to 7, sometimes even more, years, working 80-hour weeks for what often amounts to less than minimum wage. By the time you are finally a full-fledged doctor, you could easily be 37 years old. You've given nearly 2 decades of your life just to training. And for all that sacrifice, what's your reward? Well, you get your diploma, and on average, $300,000 of debt. And here's the crazy part. Back in the 1990s, that number was closer to $30,000. So this massive financial weight is crushing them before they've even earned their first real paycheck. But honestly, the debt and the long hours, they're just the beginning of the problem.
For so many doctors, the real breaking point isn't even the training. It's what happens after. They finally get into the field, they're ready to heal people, only to find out they're not really in control of how they practice medicine anymore.
Now, this might actually shock you. Being a doctor in this day and age has pretty much become a desk job. One physician estimated that 75% of his day is spent not with patients, but in front of a computer screen, dealing with paperwork and sitting in meetings. The actual thing they train to do, care for people, is getting squeezed out by all this administrative bloat.
And this chart, wow, this just perfectly illustrates one of their biggest daily frustrations. Back in the 80s, an insurance company denying a claim was almost unheard of. It just didn't happen. Fast forward to today, and nearly 20% of claims get denied. That means for every 5 times a doctor orders a test or a treatment that they believe their patient needs, one of those times they have to stop and fight a war with an insurance company just to do their job.
This quote right here just says it all, doesn't it? All that expertise they spent decades building is constantly being overruled by people who aren't clinicians, people whose main job is to cut costs, not to make sure patients get better. And that loss of autonomy, it's just completely demoralizing. So what does that loss of autonomy actually look and feel like day to day? Well, it's being constantly judged by these performance metrics that don't really mean better patient care. It's having your scores literally put up on a big screen in meetings for all your colleagues to see. It's being pressured to spend less and less time with each patient, all while being treated like you're just a replaceable number in some giant corporate machine. And all of this, it leads to a word we hear thrown around a lot, burnout. But the way doctors are describing it, it has nothing to do with just being tired. It's an attack on their entire identity, their reason for being. So, what is burnout when you're a physician? Because it's definitely not about needing a long vacation or another wellness workshop. No, the problem is so much deeper and so much more systemic than that. This is, hands down, the most powerful definition of burnout I've ever come across. It's this slow, grinding realization that the system is never going to let you be the doctor, the person you worked so hard to become. It's this constant, gut-wrenching feeling that you're failing your patients and yourself, not because you're not good enough, but because the whole system is designed to make you fail. And to make it all so much worse, the culture of medicine often gaslights them. They're told, hey, if you can't handle the pressure, the disrespect, the moral injury, which is that feeling of being forced to do things that go against your own values, then you're the one who's weak. The blame gets shoved onto the individual for not being resilient enough, instead of on the abusive system itself. And then, on top of all that, there's the human element. An orthopedic surgeon tells this story where she spent all this extra time with a patient who had a really tough complication, only to have her very next patient just chew her out for running late. And after being treated with so much disrespect, she just went into a room and broke down. It's not just the system, it's the day in, day out erosion of your spirit from a public that can be incredibly hostile and ungrateful. So when you add it all up, this isn't just a doctor problem. This is a crisis for every single one of us. Because when the very people we trust to take care of us are themselves being broken by the system, what in the world does that mean for the future of our health? The numbers are just stark. Right now, more than a third of all doctors are actively considering leaving clinical practice within the next year. Just let that sink in. 1 out of every 3 doctors you might go see could be gone in the next 12 months. And the consequences of that? Well, they're predictable, and they are severe. It means fewer doctors for a population that's only getting bigger. It means it's going to be harder to get care, especially if you live in a rural area. It means even more stress on the doctors who are left, and, yep, longer wait times for absolutely everyone. And that brings us to the final, unavoidable, and frankly, terrifying question. We have somehow built a system that actively grinds down and pushes out the very people we depend on in our most vulnerable moments. If we keep breaking our doctors, who is going to be left to pick up the pieces for the rest of us?